I'm Liyana Hassanel and you're watching Nightline. News making the headlines. PM signals potential interest rate adjustment to bolster Ringgit's value. And hardcore poverty to be eradicated this year. Good morning. Prime Minister Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim hinted that the federal government might adjust the country's interest rate to prevent the ringgit from depreciating further against the US dollar. He said the government was in the process of striking a balance between ensuring that the interest rate would not burden small and medium-scale companies and preventing the outflow of cash by investors to other countries. Datuk Seri Anwar, who is also the finance minister, pointed out that the weakening of ringgit had nothing to do with the country's economic performance. This as Malaysia's economic growth during the first quarter of this year surpassed that of Singapore, Indonesia and China. He also said that the country generated 71 billion ringgit in investments during the first 4 months of the year. While investment and economic growth are on the rising trend, the same cannot be said for the ringgit, because the country's interest rate is extremely low compared with neighbouring countries.
Jadi kalau saya ada 1 juta ringgit, saya nak masuk di bank. Saya ada pilihan di antara Malaysia, Singapura dengan Indonesia. Indonesia akan ada faedah lebih tinggi, Singapura lebih tinggi. Jadi saya pilih untuk simpan di luar. Itu problem kita sekarang. Kalau kita naikkan kadar faedah terlalu tinggi, dia bebankan syarikat-syarikat kecil dan sederhana dan orang-orang pinjam di peringkat bawah. So kita kena runding macam mana nak strike balance supaya kadar faedah itu tidak menyebabkan pelabur bawa wang keluar.
He said this at the Negeri Sembilan leg of the Temu Anwar program in Nilai on Saturday, in response to a question on the efforts taken by the federal government to prevent the ringgit from further depreciating. At a separate event, Datuk Seri Anwar reiterated his commitment to eradicate hardcore poverty in the country this year. He stressed that the entire government machinery, especially the Rural and Regional Development Ministry and its agencies, must prioritise the people's welfare and work together to put an end to the issue, instead of only focusing on big or mega projects.
Kalau tidak, kita hanya bincang high-speed railway, ECRL, projek mega Twin Tower, Kota Baru, Putrajaya. Yang miskin beli susu anak pun tak cukup, ya. Beli pakaian sekolah pun tak cukup wang. Itu yang kita berikan keutamaan, saudara.
Datuk Seri Anwar said this when launching the Sentuhan Kasih Desa program in Nilai, Negeri Sembilan on Saturday. Last month, Deputy Economy Minister Datuk Hanifah Hajar Taib told the Dewan Rakyat that the number of hardcore poor households in the country has decreased from 124,744 to 118,217 in the 5 months leading up to May 15. Based on the Household Income, Expenditure and Basic Amenities Survey Report 2019, the incidence of absolute poverty was 5.6%, while hardcore poverty was 0.4%. The hardcore poor refers to households with a monthly income of less than 1,169 ringgit, while those in absolute poverty have an income of less than 2,208 ringgit. The Prime Minister also gave his assurance that the unity government will not burden the country by adding to the existing national debt of 1.5 trillion ringgit. Datuk Seri Anwar, who is also Finance Minister, said the irresponsible practice of incurring unnecessary debt will be discontinued. In his speech, Datuk Seri Anwar said that the country had been incurring debt for many decades, starting with the administration under the second Prime Minister, Tun Abdul Razak Hussein, in the 1970s. However, the debts were incurred to develop the country.
Tapi hutang dia untuk apa? Untuk buka tanah, untuk buka felda, untuk buat pembangunan luar bandar masa itu. Jadi orang tak soal hutang yang diperlukan mengikut keupayaan kita untuk membangunkan negara. Bukan hutang untuk dan komisen berlebih-lebih, kemudian hutang jana wibawa, lingkuplah ekonomi negara.
He added that FELDA, the Rubber Industry Smallholders Development Authority, RISDA or MARA, would not have existed today if Tun Abdul Razak did not assume such debt at that time, as these organizations were established using loans from the World Bank. In January, the Prime Minister said the national debt had reached 1.5 trillion ringgit and required immediate action to address the issue, as the figure was already more than 80% of the country's gross domestic product. In another development, Datuk Seri Anwar refuted accusations suggesting that the federal government has signed off the country's interest in a maritime area in the Sulawesi Sea, which is known as Ambalat Block. He reiterated that the treaty signed during his Indonesian counterpart Joko Widodo's official visit to the country earlier this month only involved territorial maritime disputes that have been resolved and finalized between Malaysia and Indonesia. Meanwhile, Datuk Seri Anwar has called on all parties not to use political differences as a weapon of enmity. He pointed out that many inaccurate facts and slanders were being spread on social media by certain quarters to cast a negative light on the government.
Apa tak bolehkah perbezaan politik ini jangan kita jadikan senjata permusuhan, senjata fitnah. Jadikan perbezaan ini untuk bagi cadangan lebih baik. Saya belum dengar lagi apa cadangan lebih baik. Kita kurangkan subsidi elektrik, dia kata kita bebankan rakyat. Kita kurang kepada siapa? Kepada yang guna 1,500 kilowatt satu hari.
Datuk Seri Anwar, who is also Pakatan Harapan chairman, also urged members and supporters of PH and Barisan Nasional to put their past rivalries behind to face the upcoming state elections. While differences in opinion is welcome, he said all parties in the unity government should work towards a common goal, that is to improve the welfare and well-being of the people. The Malaysian Agreement 1963 MA63 Technical Committee's meeting will discuss in detail the issues to be ironed out in relation to Sarawak's wish to take over Bintulu Port from the federal government. Deputy Prime Minister Datuk Seri Fadilah Yusof, who chairs the Technical Committee, said the meeting will take place in either the first or second week of July.
Itu hasrat kajian negeri. Kalau dapat pelabuhan Bintulu ini nanti dikembalikan, barulah dapat diwujudkan single entity untuk Sarawak. Kalau tidak, ianya akan ada dua. Satu negeri, satu persekutuan.
He said this at a media conference after officiating the My Kasih Love My Neighbourhood program for the Petrajaya constituency on Saturday. Datuk Seri Fadilah also said that he will discuss the matter with Prime Minister Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim. It was previously reported that Sarawak intends to take over Bintulu Port to make it part of a cluster of state ports administered by a central port authority to be incorporated by state law. The Malaysian Communications and Multimedia Commission, MCMC, will take stern action against the dissemination of slander, including on social media, especially during the upcoming state elections. Communications and Digital Minister Fahmi Fadzil said his ministry also saw the need to study amendments to the Communications and Multimedia Act to empower MCMC with more authority to curb the matter.
Pada waktu ini kita masih perlu mendapatkan kerjasama yang erat, tapi masih terpulang kepada penyedia perkhidmatan ataupun platform-platform media sosial ini. Kalau kita lihat setengah negara lain, mereka bersikap lebih tegas dan mempertimbang tindakan seperti suspension of service. Jadi saya harap Malaysia tidak perlu ke arah itu.
Fahmi said this at a media conference after the pre-launching of Kelantan-level Madani Community Program in Kota Baru on Saturday. He added that the need to amend the Act is also to ensure that there is no provocation or slander involving race, religion, and royalty, or 3R elements. He also hoped that the amendments to the Act could be completed by end of this year. Now, foreign individuals are not allowed to purchase subsidized fuel in this country, even for recreational purposes such as motorsport activities. Domestic Trade and Cost of Living Minister Datuk Seri Salahuddin Ayub pointed out that this is part of the national policy, adding that RON 95 petrol and diesel fall under the Supply Control Act and are only meant for the use of Malaysians.
Polisi jelas, warga asing tidak boleh membeli barangan bersubsidi negara Malaysia. Dan itulah kesalahan yang serius. Dan, saya mengambil tanggungjawab 2 hari lepas itu untuk meminta penjelasan daripada pihak tuan punya petrol pump itu, dan kita memberikan sekali lagi penegasan bahawa tidak boleh sesekali menjual RON 95 kepada mana-mana warga asing.
Datuk Sri Salahuddin also stressed that those found to have committed the offence can be charged and face punishment under the country's laws. He said this when commenting on the viral video over the heated dispute between a food delivery rider and 2 Singaporeans who were attempting to buy subsidised fuel at a petrol station in Iskandar Puteri for go-kart activities. The Johor Police and the Singapore Police Force are working together to track down 2 Singaporeans who were involved in the altercation. Iskandar Puteri District Police Chief Assistant Commissioner Rahmat Arifin said an investigation paper has been opened under the Penal Code for criminal intimidation. After this breather, several injured in Cathay Pacific flight incident. Details when we return. Thailand's newly elected lawmakers will meet in the first week of July, setting in motion the process of new government formation, followed by the vote to elect a prime minister. The Royal Gazette on Saturday has published a decree for Parliament to convene on July 3rd, stating King Mahavajiralongkorn will preside over the opening ceremony. According to the decree, members of Parliament will cast votes a day later for selection of the Speaker of the House and 2 deputies. The Speaker will then call for a joint session of Parliament between the elected lower house and the appointed Senate to vote on a new Prime Minister. In the May 14th general election, the Progressive Move Forward Party, MFP, pulled off a stunning victory, closely followed by the populist Phua Thai Party, thrashing Conservative rivals allied with the Royalist military after 9 years of government led or backed by the army. An 8-party alliance made up of the opposition is expected to back MFP leader Pita Limjaroenrat for Prime Minister and form a coalition government, likely within the next month. Russian President Vladimir Putin's plane took off from Moscow early Saturday morning, heading towards St. Petersburg before disappearing from flight tracking radar. According to flight radar data retrieved by Nexta, Putin's presidential plane left at 2:16 Moscow time. While it is not clear where the plane was headed, it disappeared from tracking systems near Tver, a major city north of Moscow. Presidential spokesman Dmitry Peskov, however, denied Putin had fled the city, saying he is working at the Kremlin. The news comes as Wagner forces appear to be descending on Moscow on Friday. Wagner leader Yevgeny Prigozhin rebelled against Russia's military leadership, accusing Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu of ordering an airstrike on Wagner troops in Ukraine. Prigozhin claimed to be leading 25,000 men in a so-called March for Justice to overthrow Russia's defense ministry. The dramatic march follows months of tensions between Prigozhin and Russia's top military leaders. Meanwhile, Moscow's Mayor Sergei Sobyanin has made Monday a non-working day in the capital. He also called on Moscow residents to avoid traveling around the capital as much as possible. Australia on Saturday imposed financial sanctions and travel bans on 3 men involved in the downing of Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 or MH17 over Ukraine in 2014. Foreign Minister Penny Wong said the sanctions targeted Russian national Sergei Dubinsky and Ukrainian Leonid Karchenko, 2 of those convicted by the Dutch court last year. The third man targeted was Sergei Muchakayev, a colonel with the Russian armed forces who commanded the brigade that supplied the missile system responsible for downing the plane. In November, a Dutch court convicted 2 former Russian intelligence agents and a Ukrainian separatist leader in absentia of motive for their role in the incident and handed them life sentences. The MH17 flight was shot down by a Russian Buk missile system as it flew over eastern Ukraine from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur on July 17, 2014, killing all 298 passengers and crew, including 196 Dutch citizens and 38 Australian citizens or residents. 11 people were injured while being evacuated from a Cathay Pacific Airways flight at Hong Kong International Airport on Saturday after the carrier aborted takeoff due to a technical issue. The flight from Hong Kong to Los Angeles was carrying 17 crew and 293 passengers when its takeoff failed after at least 3 of the aircraft's tires burst. According to Cathay Pacific, 1 man and 10 women aged 29 to 77 were injured while exiting the plane using an emergency slide. 9 of the 11 passengers who received treatment at hospitals have already been discharged. The airline also said that it would continue to provide support to the victims. Jimmy. The 2023 Chinch Championships. Alex de Minaur saw off the challenge of Holger Rune to reach his maiden final at Queen's Club. The 24-year-old roared to a 6-3, 7-6 victory to become the first Australian to make the final since Leighton Hewitt won his 4th title in 2006. The Australian has a strong record on grass, winning the title in Eastbourne in 2021 and advancing to the fourth round at Wimbledon last year. He will next face Spanish top seed Carlos Alcaraz in the final. Still on tennis, the 2023 Halle Open. Third seed Andrei Rublev came from a set down to edge Talon Kriegspur and reached the semi-finals. Rublev lost the first set 3-6, but the 25-year-old Russian world number 7 clawed back into the match, taking the next two sets 6-3, 6-4, gaining victory with his fifth match point. Rublev will play against Spain's Roberto Bautista Agut in the last four. Coming up after this break, motorcycle crashes into MPV, killing 3 siblings. Stay tuned. More than 180,000 Sijil Pelajaran Malaysia SPM students chose not to further their studies. This despite the job market witnessing a significant transformation, with a growing emphasis on lifelong learning and the recognition of adaptable skills. The significance of higher education reflects the positive societal changes, driven by recent statistics that showed the majority of high positions require at least a degree. Nurin Razmin reports.
According to the latest statistics from the Higher Education Ministry, the number of job postings requiring a degree has been steadily increasing over the past decade. In 2022 alone, nearly 70% of job advertisements listed a degree as a minimum qualification, indicating the rising demand for higher education in various industries. Compared to non-graduates, university graduates see 57% more career opportunities, and it's predicted that the proportion of positions requiring a degree will rise by 10% between 2016 and 2026. However, some 680,000 SPM students from the 2021 school session chose not to pursue their studies, a significant increase from a year prior, where 939,000 school leavers from the 2020 session decided not to further their education beyond SPM. Education is something many have fought for, but as the years go by, more and more SPM leavers lose their interest in continuing their studies.
If we have 50% of Form 5 students, so that's about 200,000 students not pursuing higher studies, the country runs a risk in the long term, 20, 30, 40 years from now, from having a population that is not highly educated, that doesn't have tertiary level qualification, and we could become less competitive as a country.
However, some SPM leavers would insist that higher education is costly, leading many to think that heading into the job market should suffice to ensure a bright future.
if they are not continue their SPM, degree, I think it's not the end of the education life for them. They can still learn, especially nowadays. You can see there are so many ways to learn from Google, from whatever ChatGPT. So knowledge is not a problem for them. So as long they want to achieve their dreams, I think there are many ways to learn. Doesn't mean SPM will stop them.
In this era, basic knowledge alone is no longer enough. For most high-demand jobs, tertiary education is vital and most of the time legally required. Course requirements such as hands-on practicum provide the practical tools and abilities that are essential in order to embark into the workforce. And with every passing year, the educational sector changes its curriculum to prepare learners for this new and competitive age, showing exactly why education is important.
In today's economy, the benefits of a further education goes well beyond qualifying for a job, as research shows that earning a degree increases people's happiness, average salary, and overall health. In recent trends, however, many begin to doubt the importance of earning a degree. It is still important to embrace lifelong learning to give the youth an edge in personal growth beyond just textbook learning. Nurin Razmin for Nightline, TV3.
In Pahang, two brothers and their sister were killed after the motorcycle they were riding collided with a multi-purpose vehicle MPV at Jalan Benta Lamir in Pekan on Saturday. Pekan Police Chief Superintendent Muhammad Zaidi Madzin said all the victims died on the spot in the incident, believed to have occurred at 12:30 p.m. The victims were identified as 15-year-old Nik Ikram Idwan Nik Muhammad Khairul Hisham, 11-year-old Nik Nur Fakihah, and 5-year-old Nik Ikram Nukman from Kampung Langgar, Pekan. The incident was believed to have occurred when the motorcycle, which was heading from Kampung Lamir to Kampung Langgar, skidded onto the opposite lane and crashed into the MPV heading to Kuantan. 7 people were on board the MPV at the time, and 3 of them sustained injuries. The victims' bodies were taken to Pekan Hospital for post-mortem. The cause of the crash is being investigated under the Road Transport Act. Elsewhere, a married couple was killed while their 3 children were injured in an accident at the East-West Highway in Perak on Saturday. The 2 deceased were identified as 51-year-old Muhammad Nasir and 46-year-old Ruhaya Harun, while their injured children were identified as 14-year-old Muhammad Amir Zakwan, 12-year-old Nur Auni Patricia, and 7-year-old Muhammad Zarif. The family was on their way to Kelantan from Perlis in a Perodua Myvi before the car crashed into a trailer carrying cement at around 1 p.m. The couple was pronounced dead at the scene while the trailer driver escaped unhurt. Both the injured victims and their parents' remains were brought to Gerit Hospital. The actual cause of the crash was still being investigated. To wrap up Nightline this time around, let's take a look as Hajj pilgrims in Saudi Arabia visited the Cave of Hira on Saturday, ahead of the start of Hajj on Monday. You have been with me, Liyana Hassanel, for the past half an hour. Thank you for tuning in and stay safe, Malaysia.